Okay, here we are back again, this time doing building block number 9, left twist. There really won't be anything too surprising or unusual about this block. The left twist is just the mirror image of the right twist that we already did in block number 6. So the technique should be relatively familiar, but we'll go over that. Once again, I have gone ahead and done the 6 rows of seed stitch border so that we're ready to start our pattern. Once again, we have a setup row that is worked only our first time through before proceeding then to row 2 of the body pattern. Then we'll go through to row 16, come back to row 1, repeating that 4 times. On the final time, ending with row 15, then doing a decrease row. We've seen this several times before in previous blocks, before then doing the top border. So once more, we'll just go ahead and go over the setup row, how to do that knit front and back increase. We're just increasing 2 stitches over the body so that we wind up with a total of 50 stitches before beginning. The decrease row is then just going to be purl 2 together at either end of the body of that block to go back down to 48 stitches. Okay, so nothing scary or unusual in this one, just kind of taking that right twist and flipping it. So let me zoom out here and we'll get started with that setup row. Once again, I just go ahead and work those 4 seed stitch border stitches. That next stitch is knit front and back, increasing 2 stitches from 1 stitch. So I go into the front of the stitch, wrap my yarn, pull it through, then flip over, come in through the back of that same stitch, wrap, and pull through so that I now have 2 stitches from that 1 stitch. I am then going to go all the way across, knitting to the last stitch, meaning I will have 5 stitches left on my needle. I'll knit front and back into that 5th stitch and then knit my 4 seed stitch border stitches, and that will give me a stitch count of 50 for my block before then proceeding right to row 2. Okay, so when I turn the camera back on again, we'll be ready to do row 3, because row 6 is just knit 6, purl 6, knit 6 all the way across the body stitches. So nothing complicated or surprising there. And then the first time that we encounter the left twist is in row 3. So I'll turn the camera back on again when we're ready to do row 3. I'm going to suggest that when we start working on the body, you have your row counter and maybe some post-its handy, because that is going to help you keep track of where you are in these 16 rows. Your row counter will tell you whether you're on rows 1 through 16, and your post-it you could actually put on your book to help you keep track, because say my row counter says I'm knitting row 4, then my post-it I could put, because it's just repeating row 2. Likewise, row 5 is the same as row 1. So I could put my post-it right under row 1 and have the instructions sort of highlighted for me so that I know exactly what I'm doing and it's really easy to keep track. Okay, so here I am back again, having worked the remainder of my setup row that we started together. Then I worked row 2, which was just knit 6, purl 6, knit 6 all the way across. And now we're going to work row 3, which keeps up the continuity of that checkerboard pattern that we began with row 2, but it's going to introduce the left twist. Okay, so we'll work that together, demonstrate the left twist, and then I will turn off the camera and we will come back on again when it's time to work row 9, which is still basically the same thing, but the checkerboard pattern will have shifted over, and I'll just go ahead and do that to review that left twist yet again, even though it'll still be exactly the same thing that we're working for row 3, row 1, and row 11. It's the same every time, just different combinations of it and in different orders. Okay? So let's go ahead and work row 3. And of course I start out, as I do every time, with the 4 stitches of seed stitch border. Oops. And then it's purl 6. And you can see those 6 purl bumps that already exist there, that you established that foundation with row 2 on the previous side. So we'll purl 6. Now we're going to knit 1, left twist twice, knit 1, and go back to purl 6. So I will knit 1, I'm going to left twist twice. Now the left twist instructions are to skip the first stitch, knit the second stitch through the back of the loop, then knit the skipped stitch in the front of the loop and slip both from the needle together. So I'm going to kind of flip my work so that I can better see the back of those stitches. I'm skipping the first stitch, I'm coming in to the back of that second stitch. Might be a little bit tricky, but we'll get it. And you'll become more comfortable with it as you practice it again and again, and I'm doing it very slowly for the camera. So I'm in the back of that second stitch, wrap, and purl through, or pull through, not purl through. And then I'm going to come back in that first stitch just like normal and knit it, and I'm going to pull them both right off the needle. Okay? And you can kind of see, I'm going to hold this up to the camera a bit more. You can kind of see how now we have that top stitch leaning toward the left. Okay? So we're going to do it again. We're going to come in the back of that second stitch, wrap and purl through, then in the front, and hopefully this video will be usable. It's a little bit breezy. I'm outside today. My kids are inside, all of them doing online school. There's also a lawnmower next door, so hopefully all of the sound will come out okay on this. But we've left twisted twice, knit 1, and then we're going to go back to purl 6. Okay, now, so you can kind of see how this pattern is starting to establish. It's getting that checkerboard look to it, but our knit part of the checkerboard has those stitches that are leaning toward the left. All right, knit one. We're going to left twist twice, come in through the back of that stitch, then the front of the first one. We're going to left twist a second time. Now I will say, when you're knitting that second stitch on the needle, you don't want it to be really loose, but you want to keep a little bit of slack in it so that you have room to then come in. And the second one, you don't want to choke up on it so hard that it's going to cinch those stitches really tightly together. You don't want it too loose either, but just don't be pulling your working yarn so tightly that you kind of strangle your stitches as you go. That's really the only thing to remember with this, because other than doing exactly what I just demonstrated, there's not much else to it. Keep track of what row you are on. Again, as I suggested, with your row counter and your post-it notes. Execute that left twist as I showed you, and you should be a-okay on this one. Okay, so I'm going to speak for just a moment about how you might determine where in the pattern you are, even if you're trying to use your row counter and your post-its to keep track of where you are, but maybe for some reason you lose your place. I've had my cat take my post-it note, or someone taps my counter, or something like that. Anyway, things can happen and you can lose your place, and I'm going to try and explain how I would try to determine where I was in the pattern if I did lose my place. We know that every wrong side row is just a repeat of either row 2, depending on what part you're in, or row 10. And that should be pretty obvious based on whether you're starting with 6 knits, that would be a row 2, or 6 purls, and that would be a row 10. Oops, sorry, I'm not pointing at that on the camera. All right? So if your working yarn is at the start of a wrong side row, it's going to be pretty easy to determine what you need to do next. All right? Now, if on the other hand, your working yarn is back on a right side row, and you're trying to figure out which right side row you're working, this is what I would do. First of all, during the sequence of these pattern repeats, you are going to work row 1 twice during that checkerboard part. Once as row 1, and then as row 5, you're working same as row 1. So 2 times you're going to work row 1, and then row 3 and 7 is same as row 3. So row 1 is worked twice, row 3 is worked twice. All right? Now, at the beginning of the twists for a row 3, you're working the left twist twice, so you would have a straight knit 1 and 2 twists. If, on the other hand, you were working a row 1, you perform that left twist 3 times. So you can kind of look at your work. You can see that on the last right side row that I worked, I obviously did the left twist 3 times. You can see it right here. There are no straight knit columns coming up on the sides, and I have 1, 2, 3 twists. That means the next row that I need to work is going to be a row 7, because it will be the same as row 3. Similarly, you can count purl rows in the part of the checkerboard that is purled. So I can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 purl rows that I've worked. But on this first repeat of the pattern, I started with a row 2. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I also end up knowing that the next row I need to work is a row 7, which is the same conclusion I come to reading the twists and knowing that the last row I worked was a row 5, so this time it has to be a row 7. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully it's not too confusing, but I want to let you know how you could go about reading your work in case you lost your place. All right, so here I am ready to work row number 9. You can see that I have the first section of my checkerboard pattern that's been worked, and I'm now ready to shift that over. And I'll show you the way that we're gonna do that. So just following the instructions for row number 9. Again, I'm going to work my 4 seed stitch border stitches. And now, where I had this purl square, I am instead going to work a left twist 3 times. So I'm going to come in the back of that center of the second stitch on my needle, knit it, come in through the front of the first stitch on the needle, and knit that, pull them both off, again in through the back of that second stitch, knit it, in through the front of the second stitch, knit that, and then do that one more time. Then I purl 6, where before I had those left twist knit stitches. I'm going to purl to give the opposite texture to create that checkerboard pattern. Alright, again, I've got my 6 stitches that were purled previously. I'm going to do my 3 left twist, in through the back, the second stitch, in through the front of the first, in through the back of the second stitch, in through the front of the first. Okay. Now I purl against those, purl across those next 6, and that is really all there is to this entire block. Is just following those instructions, executing that left twist where needed, and you're going to create this checkerboard pattern that should look really cool. And now you'll know how to do both a right twist and a left twist. So I will turn the camera back on again just to show that decrease row really quickly, how we do that purl two together, and then the finished block. Okay, here I am back having finished 4 repeats of that 16 row body section. You can see that in these alternating checkerboard squares I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 repeats, and then I am ready to start that decrease row, having just completed row 15, which is a right side row where we do the same as row 11. All right, so you can see that pattern that's emerged, and you can also see that I have run out of yarn. So I'm also going to join a new ball during the process of this decrease row. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that, and we'll demonstrate the purl two together decrease again really quickly. And I'll do 1 row of the top border just to show knitting in that tail a bit more. All right, so here I am, wrong side, about to work our decrease row. I'm going to use what remains of my tail to work the first few stitches here, working my seed stitch border. Alright, and now my tail is getting quite short, so I'm going to bring that up, and I'm going to grab my new ball. I'm going to put these kind of, actually I'm going to put that like that, so the tail of my new ball is toward the front of my work for now, and I'm grasping the strand coming from my new ball together with the tail from the old ball of yarn. And I'm going to purl two together, meaning that I'm just putting my needle through those next 2 stitches together. Wrap the yarn, pull it through, 1 stitch from where there were 2 stitches before. It looks a bit doubled because I'm using 2 strands temporarily, but that's okay. We're going to treat that as 1 stitch. It's relatively obvious that it's a single stitch when we come back to it. And we're going to purl to those last 2 body stitches. You can see that I'm using that tail together with the new strand of yarn until I just don't have enough to even wrap with it anymore, and I'm just going to leave it right there. Okay? And continue on with the strand coming from my new ball of yarn. And I'm just going to purl all the way across. So there's our 4 border stitches. There's the last 2. Purl those together. And we've decreased back down to 48 stitches now. Work those 4 border stitches. All right. Now we're ready to work our 5 rows of seed stitch border for the top. You can see the tail that's hanging out here. We'll take care of that when we get back over here. You can also see that some of those stitches are doubled where I was holding the 2 strands together, and that's fine. We'll take care of those when we get back over there too. All right. So you can see my tail here and how I'm just going to knit those or work. I'm seed stitching here. You can see the double stranded stitch here, which is fine. I'm just going to go ahead and work that together as I would normally. Then I come back to this tail. I'm going to bring it back to the back of my work because I'm going to work a knit stitch next. And just work those doubled stitches, knitting in that tail. And I'm going to let it go ahead and hang here at the edge as I turn it around. And again, just work those doubled stitches together, knitting those tails right into the body of my work. And then I'm just back to regular stitches again. All right, and then these little bits of tail are going to hang out, and I'm going to come back with my tapestry needle and just sort of weave those into the wrong side of my work, and they won't even be visible. Okay, here we are back again. I have finished my block, and I thought I would just really quickly go over again how I block that out. It has been soaked with a bit of eucalyptus and some tepid water for probably half an hour or so. And I just carefully squeezed it out, all that excess water into the sink. I actually use a salad spinner to wring even more water out of it so that it'll just dry a bit faster. But you certainly don't need to do that. I have my old beat up foam block here, foam square. You can see all the other pin marks in it. Even my kids have marked this up a bit, but I taped off my 12 by 12 square. So I'm just going to take my still damp blanket square, and I'm going to kind of make sure it fits nicely into this taped off area. Some parts of it I'll need to stretch out a bit, and some of it I'll kind of contract in. And I'm just going to take these are my Knitter's Pride knit blockers. Again, you can see that they're well worn. They've been used for a long time. I think now they come in multiple colors instead of just white. But I've had these for a long time, and I enjoy using them a lot for just this purpose. So I'm just coming in right at that top edge and pressing it right in. I'm going to go ahead and do the corners first. I feel like that gets me where I need to be. I'm going to move my ends out of the way a little bit here, just to make sure I'm exactly where I need to be. All right. And I usually like to get not only side to side and top to bottom to move everything in where it should be. And if it's a little bit into the edge of your taped off area, that's fine. But I try to get it as close as I can because we want all of these blocks to be the same size in our finished blanket. So there's my edge. And while damp, the wool will want to stretch a bit, but as it dries, it will tend to kind of, if you stretch it out, it will stay stretched out. But if you kind of bring it in to where it needs to be, then it will tend to contract a little bit as it dries. And wool in particular is quite good at holding the shape that it's pinned to when it's damp. However it dries is the shape that it is likely to hold. Alright, so I'm just scooching this in a bit. And I have just enough knit blockers for all those edges, And I'm just going to kind of massage things into place within the block. Make sure any slack is evenly distributed. Smooth everything out. Get it nice and square. Make sure those rows aren't wavy or wobbly. And just get everything laid out nice. And then when it dries, it will hold this shape. It should dry pretty quickly. It's just a bit damp. And outside today, it is a lovely, probably around 70-degree day with just a bit of a breeze. So I would bet this will dry in no time at all. And that's it. We have completed block number 9, left twist. Next time, we are going to take on block number 10, slip, slip, knit. And until then, I hope you enjoyed this block.